The first time I saw that white SUV roll down the dusty trail toward my lake, I figured it was a wrong turn. Folks get lost a lot around here. GPS doesn't do too well with old county roads that twist between hills and pastures. But when the same SUV came back the next day, towing jet skis and loaded with coolers, I knew something wasn't right. That lake, my lake, has been in my family for 3 generations. My granddad dug it with his own 2 hands and a rusty old dozer back in 1952. He used to say, "You can build a life anywhere, but water gives it roots." I'd inherited the property 15 years ago. After losing my wife, the lake became my peace. Every morning, I'd grab a thermos of coffee, head down the trail, and sit on the dock while the mist rolled over the still water. Just me, the fish, and the soft whistle of the pines. But that peace ended the moment she showed up, Karen. She was the new president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association, a collection of $500,000 homes built on the far end of what used to be my granddad hayfield. They had manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, and apparently no idea where their property line ended. The morning after that white SUV incident, I walked out to the dock and saw them, for people unloading chairs right on my shoreline. 2 kids were already splashing the shallows, tossing beer cans on the bank. I walked down, calm but firm. "Morning." I called out, "Can I ask what you're doing on my property?" A woman in a big sun hat turned, hands on hips. "Oh, we're just using the lake." Karen said it's community access. I blinked. Community access? This isn't part of Maple Ridge. She frowned like I'd just spoken another language. Well, our HOA owned the land around it, so technically the lake is shared. I laughed softly. "Ma'am, your HOA might own that cul-de-sac and those sidewalks, but this lake? It's been in my family long before any of that was built. You're standing on private land." She didn't like that. She huffed, gathered her things, and left, muttering something about checking with the board. 2 days later, I met Karen. She marched up my driveway like she owned the place, hair stiff as a helmet, clipboard in hand, wearing a bright red blazer despite the 80-degree weather. The kind of woman who's never met a boundary she didn't want to control. "Mr. Parker?" she asked, scanning me up and down. "That's right," I said, leaning on my rake. "Can I help you?" "I'm Karen Dawson, president of the Maple Ridge HOA. I think there's been some confusion regarding the lake access." "No confusion," I said. "That's my family's lake." "Well," she smiled tightly, "our community plat map indicates that the shoreline borders Maple Ridge's recreation zone. Therefore, homeowners are entitled to—" "Stop right there," I interrupted. "Bordering something doesn't mean owning it. That's my fence line, and everything past it, right down to water, is on my deed." Her smile twitched. "We'll see about that." She turned and strutted off like she'd just delivered a legal verdict. But something in her tone told me this wasn't over. Over the next few weeks, it became a pattern. Every Friday, new cars would show up by the lake. Loud music, beer cans, cigarette butts, and always the same excuse. Karen said it's fine. So I did what any rational man would do. I put up a gate at the trailhead, a sturdy iron one my neighbor Hank welded for me. A big sign hung across it: "Private property and no trespassing." That should have solved it. But 2 days later, the lock was cut clean through. That's when my patience ended. That evening, I drove down to the HOA office, or clubhouse, as they called it. There she was, sipping iced tea on the veranda, surrounded by a small group of residents hanging on her every word. When she saw me, her face froze. I didn't bother with small talk. "You cut my gate lock," I said flatly. Her lips curved into a fake smile. "Oh, that gate was obstructing community access. I had maintenance handle it." I laughed, shaking my head. "You just admitted to property damage." "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said, brushing me off. "This lake is part of Maple Ridge's natural ecosystem. It benefits everyone." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Karen, let me make this very clear. My granddad built that lake. I pay the taxes. You and your board don't have any right to it." Her smile hardened. "We'll see what the county says." A week later, I got a certified letter. The HOA was formally requesting shared access rights to my lake under community recreational ground expansion. They cited zoning codes, old waterway maps, even environmental clauses. It was laughable, but they were serious. That's when I called my cousin Dean, an attorney who dealt with land disputes for 30 years. He came over that weekend, wearing jeans and a grin. HOA trouble again, huh? He chuckled. You Parker boys sure know how to make enemies. I handed him the letter. He read it, smirked, and said, they don't have a leg to stand on, but let's make sure they learn that the hard way. A few days later, we posted laminated copies of my deed and survey map right next to the gate. Every line, every coordinate. The message was clear. This lake belongs to the Parker family. But Karen? She wasn't one to back down gracefully. That Sunday, I caught her hosting what looked like a full-blown lake party. 10 cars lined up, people barbecuing by the water, kids on floats. And right in the middle of it all, Karen, waving her hands and shouting, community property. Folks, don't let him scare you. I walked down slowly, the crunch of gravel under my boots echoing like thunder. The chatter faded as I approached. Karen, I said, voice calm but cold, this ends now. She turned red-faced. You can't tell us what to do. This lake is for everyone. No, I said quietly. It's for the people who built it and care for it, not for someone who cuts locks and leaves trash. A hush fell over the crowd. Her guests looked uneasy. A few started to gather their things. Then Karen shouted, You're harassing us. I'm calling the sheriff. Good idea, I said. I already did. The deputy arrived 20 minutes later, a tall, easygoing man named Sheriff Morgan. I'd known him for years. He looked from me to Karen, then at the crowd. Afternoon, folks. What seems to be the issue? Karen jumped in before I could speak. This man is illegally blocking access to our community lake. He's been harassing residents. Morgan raised an eyebrow. Community lake, huh? Last I checked, this is Parker land. She scoffed. That's what he claims. But we have a right to use it. Morgan took off his sunglasses. Ma'am, do you have any documents showing that? She hesitated. Well, the HOA map shows. I'm talking about a county deed. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Morgan turned to me. You got your paperwork handy, Hank? Right here. I handed him a copy of the deed. He glanced through it and nodded and handed it back. Looks clear to me, he said. Ma'am, this property isn't yours and neither is the lake. I suggest you pack it up. Karen's face went crimson. You can't, this is harassment. Morgan smiled kindly but firm. What's harassment is trespassing on private land after being told not to. You do it again, I'll have to cite you. The silence that followed was delicious. Her guests scrambled to leave. Karen stood there trembling, eyes burning holes through me. She hissed, You'll regret this, old man. I just smiled. Maybe, but not today. I figured that'd be the end of it. I underestimated her. 2 weeks later, a letter came from the county environmental office. A complaint filed anonymously claiming my lake was a public safety hazard due to unregulated water retention. It was her. Of course it was. They wanted to inspect the dam, check permits, review ownership records. I could feel my blood pressure spike. But I'd learned from Grandpa, when someone tries to bury you in paperwork, you dig deeper and build higher. Dean handled the paperwork. He pulled every record, every permit, every photograph going back 70 years. We even had Grandpa's original hand-drawn survey from the 50s. When the inspector came, he spent all of 10 minutes walking around, whistling softly. This is solid work, he said. Whoever filed this complaint wasted our time. He signed off the report, patted my shoulder, and said, You've got nothing to worry about, Mr. Parker. I watched his truck drive away, then looked out across the still water. The setting sun shimmered like molten gold, but I knew she wasn't done yet. A month passed in peace. Then one morning, I woke up to hammering. I walked down the trail and froze. Karen and 2 men were putting up a sign. Maple Ridge Community Lake. Members only. She actually drove Poston to my land. That was it. I called Dean. Time to end this. He grinned. I'll handle the paperwork. You handle the optics. 3 days later, we held a meeting, not at their clubhouse, but right there at the lake. Dean brought copies of the survey, the original deed, and the letter from the county inspector. Sheriff Morgan showed up, too, just in case. Dozens of residents came. Many were embarrassed. Some hadn't realized they'd been trespassing. Karen arrived last, looking confident, until she saw the sheriff. Dean spoke first, his voice calm and professional. Ladies and gentlemen, this lake is not, and never has been, part of Maple Ridge. It sits entirely on private property owned by the Parker family. All official county records confirm this. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Karen tried to interrupt, but Dean raised a hand. Furthermore, Ms. Dawson's unauthorized signage and repeated trespassing constitute criminal acts. However, my client is willing to resolve this amicably if the HOA agrees to a written acknowledgement of boundary limits and a public apology. The silence was heavy. All eyes turned to Karen. She stammered, This can't be right. Our maps." "Your maps," Dean said, "were self-drawn by a developer who never purchased this section of land." Finally, one of the residents spoke up. "Karen, did you even check any of this?" Her face went pale. She turned away, muttering, "This isn't over." But it was. The HOA board voted that night to issue a formal apology and pay for the damages to my gate. Karen resigned shortly after, though rumor was she'd been forced out. Now, every morning when I sit on that dock, the lake is quiet again. The air smells of pine and still water. Sometimes I see one of the old HOA folks walk by the fence, wave politely, and move on. Respect restored. I keep that old sign, the one she posted, hanging in my barn. It reads Maple Ridge Community Lake. Every time I see it, I chuckle, because that's the thing about people like Karen. They think power gives them ownership. But real ownership comes from care, from history, from the work you put into the land, and the love you leave behind. Grandpa used to say, "You can't fence off decency, but you can sure build one to keep fools out." He was right, and I built mine strong enough that no HOA will ever break it again.